Welcome, fellow travelers, on this journey called life. Have you ever felt the whisper of a forgotten dream? A melody you started but never finished? Tonight, we're going to meet Lena, a woman who understood that feeling all too well. She was a quiet storm, a symphony waiting to erupt, trapped for too long in the hushed elegance of the Obsidian Plate, an upscale restaurant nestled in the vibrant heart of Atlanta, Georgia. Most patrons just saw her as a blur of efficiency in a crisp black uniform, a polite smile fixed on her face as she navigated tables laden with expensive wine and delicate entrees. They saw the calm exterior, the professional grace. But beneath that poised facade, Lena harbored a secret, a profound passion for music that simmered vibrant and alive, refusing to be extinguished by the mundane rhythm of her daily grind. Lena, barely in her late 20s, possessed a gift that was both a blessing and a burden. From the time she was a little girl, the piano had been her confidant, her escape, a place where every joy and every sorrow found its voice. It was her grandmother, a former jazz singer with a voice like warm honey, and a spirit like aged whiskey, who first placed Lena's small fingers on the keys of an old out-of-tune upright piano. That piano, a gift from a kind neighbor, became Lena's world. Her grandmother taught her not just notes, but feeling, the soul behind the sound. And Lena, a prodigy in the making, absorbed it all, teaching herself intricate classical pieces and improvising melodies that seemed to flow directly from her heart. The dream, the big audacious dream, was Juilliard, the most prestigious music school in the world. For years it was the North Star, guiding her the ultimate destination for her extraordinary talent. But dreams, especially, the grand ones, often come with an impossible price tag. And life, as it often does, had a cruel twist in store. Just as Lena stood on the precipice of applying poise to leap towards her future, a relentless wave of medical bills for her ailing mother, and the sudden overwhelming responsibility of caring for her younger siblings crashed down upon their modest home. The dream, once so vivid, began to fade, replaced by the harsh reality of earning a living. How many of us have been there? Stood at a crossroads where personal aspirations collide head-on with an unwavering sense of duty. We see it every day. Brilliant minds forced to choose practicality over passion. Dedicated artists shelving their brushes and instruments to punch a clock. It's the silent tragedy playing out in countless lives, the what-ifs that haunt our quiet moments. For Lena, the choice was agonizing but clear. Juilliard would have to wait. The piano, her refuge, became a symbol of a dream, deferred, not abandoned, but held in a painful suspension. Working at the Obsidian Plate wasn't just a job for Lena. It was a necessity, a means to an end. It paid the bills, kept a roof over their heads, and almost ironically, brought her close to a beautiful grand piano, tucked away in the restaurant's lounge. Just knowing it was there, even if she rarely had a moment to touch its gleaming keys, offered a strange comfort. Yet years of financial strain and missed opportunities had taken their toll. A quiet self-doubt began to whisper in Lena's ear. Had her prime passed? Was it too late? That insidious voice, the one that tells us our moment is gone, can be the cruelest antagonist of all. She'd occasionally steal moments at a small, slightly out-of-tune piano at her church or a community center, her fingers relearning the familiar melodies, trying to silence the persistent doubt. Now Lena had dealt with her share of challenging customers. But one particular regular, a prominent real estate mogul named Sterling Finch, was a special breed of arrogance. He was a man who entered a room as if he owned it, his sharp tongue and penchant for spectacle known throughout the city. Lena had served him a few nights before, and his dismissive glance, his almost imperceptible sneer as he made a condescending remark about her potential, while she poured his wine, had subtly chafed her. It was a fleeting interaction, one she'd tried to brush off, but it left a faint bitter taste. Little did she know that seemingly insignificant encounter was merely the first discordant note in a symphony of scorn that would soon demand her full, unwavering attention, pushing her to a breaking point. And perhaps to a breakthrough she never saw coming. That Friday night, the air at the Obsidian Plate hummed with the sophisticated symphony of an upscale restaurant. The gentle clinking of silverware, the murmur of refined conversations, and the faint, almost imperceptible strains of elevator jazz created an ambiance of effortless indulgence. Lena moved through it all with practiced ease, a quiet observer in a world of opulence, her mind occasionally drifting to a melody, a chord progression she'd been working on in her rare moments of quiet. She was accustomed to the ebb and flow of the dinner rush, the delicate dance of serving discerning patrons. But tonight, a discordant note was about to be struck. The large mahogany doors swung open, and in walked Sterling Finch, the air practically crackling around him. He wasn't just entering a restaurant, he was making an entrance. Flanked by a few equally polished companions, Finch exuded an air of superiority. His expensive suit and ostentatious watch gleamed under the soft lighting. He was known for his razor-sharp tongue and a penchant for spectacle thriving on pushing people's buttons, especially those he deemed beneath him. Lena's colleagues exchanged knowing glances. Finch was not an easy guest. He was the kind of man who enjoyed reminding everyone of his elevated status, casually dismissing anyone who dared to challenge his self-proclaimed brilliance. For Lena, though, he was just another table, another set of orders to manage in a long night's work. She tried to remain detached, focused on her tasks, avoiding his gaze as she moved between tables. She'd dealt with difficult customers before, but something about him felt different. Not just rude, but calculated. His presence loomed like a shadow, making her uneasy in a way she couldn't quite shake. By the time the appetizers were served, Finch had already started his performance, though not the kind Lena expected. He held court at his table, loudly recounting tales of his successes, peppering in jabs about people who lacked ambition or grit. His companions chuckled dutifully, while other diners shot annoyed glances in his direction. Lena tried to stay focused, but as she returned to his table with a bottle of wine, Finch caught her off guard. "Tell me, Lena," he said, his voice cutting through the noise, a predatory glint in his eyes. "What do you do when you're not carrying plates? Surely a young woman like you has dreams." His words stopped her mid-pour. Lena hesitated, then gave a careful answer. "I play piano sometimes," she said softly, hoping to keep it brief. Finch's eyes lit up, and a slow, cruel smile curled across his lips. "A pianist, huh? How fascinating. Why don't you give us a little performance?" Lena froze. The room seemed to quiet the weight of his words hanging in the air. "Oh, I couldn't," she said quickly, forcing a nervous laugh. "I'm just here to work tonight." But Finch wasn't about to let it go. "Nonsense," he declared, his voice booming. "There's a piano right there in the corner. Show us what you've got. Surely a future star like you isn't afraid of a little audience." His companions chuckled, clearly enjoying the show. Other diners turned their heads, curious about the commotion. Lena's chest tightened. She could feel the heat of their stares, the silent judgment waiting to unfold. She wanted to say no, to walk away, to disappear. But Finch's challenge hung in the air, daring her to rise to it or crumble under its weight. "I really shouldn't," Lena stammered, glancing around for support. But even her colleagues seemed hesitant to intervene. Finch leaned back in his chair, sipping his scotch with a smug smirk. "Ah, I see," he said mockingly. "All talk, no talent. That's disappointing." The words hit like a slap. Lena's hands clenched at her sides. She wasn't one to seek confrontation, but the way he dismissed her, like she was a joke, a nobody, cut deeper than she expected. It wasn't just about the insult. It was about the years of quiet sacrifice, the dreams she'd put on hold, all belittled in one sneering remark. She thought of her grandmother's weathered hands on the keys, the lessons of pride and perseverance she'd instilled. A moment of excruciating silence stretched between them. Lena glanced at the grand piano in the lounge, then back at Finch, his smug expression daring her to take the bait. He thought he had her. He thought she was just another easily intimidated service worker. And that's when the truly unexpected happened. Finch leaned forward again, his voice dropping to a low, chilling whisper that only Lena could hear. "You know, Lena," he murmured, his eyes locking onto hers, "it's always the ones with the big dreams who end up scrubbing floors. Some people are just destined for this, aren't they? Just like your family." That was the twist. That was the spark. It wasn't just about her talent anymore. It was about every single quiet struggle, every deferred hope, every dismissive glance she'd ever received. It was about her grandmother, her mother, her siblings. It was about generations of people told they weren't enough. His words were designed to break her spirit, to remind her of her place. But instead, they ignited a fiery resolve she didn't know she still possessed. Her grandmother's voice, clear as a bell, echoed in her mind. Never let anyone make you small, child. You are bigger than they'll ever know. And against her better judgment, fueled by a sudden potent mix of outrage and fierce determination, Lena made her choice. Fine, she said, her voice steady but low, cutting through the lingering tension. I'll play. The room bristled with anticipation as Lena walked toward the piano, each step carrying the weight of both fear and defiance. The elegant dining room seemed to hold its breath as she approached the gleaming grand piano, the soft glow of the chandelier above casting a spotlight on her, isolating her from the murmuring crowd. Behind her, Sterling Finch leaned back in his chair, the picture of smug satisfaction, as though he had already won whatever cruel game he was playing. But he had just made a profound mistake. He thought he was watching a humiliation. He was about to witness a revelation. The dining room seemed to hold its breath as Lena approached the gleaming grand piano. The soft glow of the chandelier above cast a spotlight on her, isolating her from the murmuring crowd. Her fingers trembled as she slid onto the bench, the polished keys gleaming like a challenge waiting to be met. Behind her, Sterling Finch leaned back in his chair, the picture of smug satisfaction, as though he had already won whatever cruel game he was playing. He was enjoying the spectacle, savoring what he believed would be her public humiliation. Lena closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely think. This wasn't the cozy community gathering, not the small church recital she'd once known. This was different. This was hostile. Every eye in the room felt like a spotlight, every whisper a judgment. But there was no turning back now. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their cool surface beneath her fingertips. The first notes were soft, hesitant, almost fragile. A few diners shifted in their seats, and someone coughed in the back of the room. Lena ignored them, her focus sharpening as she leaned into the music. She chose a piece that had always spoken to her soul, a soulful rendition of a spiritual hymn that blended into an original composition, weaving through the air like a delicate but unyielding thread. It wasn't just a song. It was her song. As her confidence grew, the music swelled her hands, moving with a grace that belied the chaos inside her. The notes poured out like a confession, each chord seeming to carry a piece of her story. The sacrifices her grandmother made, the nights she spent practicing in a cramped room, the weight of dreams deferred but never abandoned. This wasn't just about playing. This was about speaking. Speaking her truth, her pain, her unwavering hope through the only language that truly made sense to her. The diners fell silent, their earlier chatter replaced by a collective stillness. Even Sterling Finch, who had been whispering to his companions, went quiet. Lena didn't need to look at him to feel the shift in the room. The mocking energy had dissipated, replaced by something she couldn't quite name. Perhaps awe, perhaps humility. Some patrons subtly put down their forks, their expressions morphing from polite curiosity to genuine astonishment. Waitstaff, who had been bustling about, paused, mesmerized by the unexpected beauty. A few discreetly pulled out their phones, not to capture a moment of humiliation, but a moment of raw, undeniable brilliance. The music soared, and Lena let herself go. For the first time in what felt like years, she wasn't just a waitress or a struggling dreamer. She was simply herself, an artist. Her fingers danced across the keys, drawing out emotions so raw and vivid they seemed to hang in the air like smoke. It was a testament to resilience, a defiance against every voice that had ever told her she wasn't enough. Every note was a whisper of defiance, every chord a shout of triumph. She played not just for herself, but for every person in that room who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told to know their place. By the time she struck the final chord, the room was utterly still. For a moment, there was no sound, just the lingering resonance of the piano. Lena sat frozen, her hands still resting on the keys, unsure of what would come next. Then, as though released from a spell, the audience erupted into applause. The sound was thunderous, reverberating off the walls, and filling the room with a warmth Lena hadn't expected. Some diners stood clapping with a fervor that brought tears to her eyes. Her co-workers who had been watching from the sidelines joined in, their faces lit with pride. It was a standing ovation for courage, for talent, for a spirit that refused to be broken. Sterling Finch, however, remained seated. His smirk was gone, replaced by an expression Lena couldn't quite decipher. Part shock, part discomfort. He raised his hands and clapped slowly, a hollow sound compared to the cheers around him. But even his hesitant applause couldn't overshadow what Lena had just done. She had reclaimed her voice, her power, and no amount of condescension could ever take that away. The tables literally and figuratively had been turned. He thought he was staging a spectacle of her failure. Instead, he had become an unwilling spectator to her undeniable triumph. The grand piano, once a symbol of her deferred dreams, now echoed with the triumphant melody of her unbreakable spirit. As the thunderous applause began to fade, the room seemed to exhale collectively. Lena slowly stood, her knees still trembling, but her back straight. She glanced around, and for the first time that evening, she truly saw the people watching her. Not as spectators, but as witnesses. Their expressions carried something new: admiration, respect, and even a hint of awe. She didn't look at Sterling Finch right away. Instead, she gave a small polite nod to the diners, who had clapped the loudest, her lips curving into a faint smile. It wasn't pride she felt, but relief. Relief that she hadn't let fear silence her. Then, as though magnetized, her gaze shifted to Finch. He was still seated, his hands clasped in front of him on the table. The confident smirk he'd worn so brazenly earlier was nowhere to be seen. Instead, his face was a mask of forced neutrality, as though he couldn't decide whether to admit his misstep or double down on his arrogance. "Well," Finch finally said, his voice louder than it needed to be, breaking the fragile silence that had settled over the room. "That was unexpected." He chuckled lightly, though it lacked its usual bravado. "I suppose talent really does come from the most surprising places." The comment landed like a dull thud. His companions exchanged awkward glances, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. "Thank you," Lena said, her tone steady and deliberate. There was no warmth in her voice, but no hostility either. She wasn't about to let him pull her back into the smallness he'd tried to impose. Her performance had spoken louder than any rebuttal she could offer. Finch cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable under the weight of the room's collective gaze. He gestured toward the waiter for another drink, a flimsy attempt to regain his composure. "You've got quite a gift," he added almost begrudgingly. Lena nodded once, her gaze unwavering. "Everyone has a gift," she said, the weight of her words deliberate. "It's how you choose to use it that matters." The room seemed to hold its breath again. The subtle sting of her response rippling through the air. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, but it was enough. Finch shifted in his seat, his usual air of dominance slipping further with each passing second. The diners began to turn their attention back to their meals, though the energy in the room had shifted entirely. Where there had once been the quiet hum of privilege and pretense, there was now something richer. A shared understanding, perhaps even respect for the waitress who had reminded everyone of the power of authenticity. Finch wasn't just humiliated, he was exposed, and no amount of charm could shield him from the truth everyone in the room now saw. Lena stepped away from the piano, the weight of the moment settling in her chest. Her colleagues greeted her with quiet smiles and subtle nods of encouragement as she returned to her station. She still had a job to finish, but something about her posture had changed. Her head was held a little higher, her movements more deliberate. Finch's table had quieted. His entourage, who had laughed so freely at her expense earlier, now avoided eye contact, their conversation subdued. The bravado that once filled their corner of the restaurant had evaporated, leaving only an awkward silence in its place. The night continued, but Lena felt lighter. Each step she took through the dining room felt more purposeful, her confidence blooming in a way she hadn't expected. As she refilled glasses and cleared plates, patrons stopped her to offer kind words. "You're incredible," one older woman said softly as Lena sat down a coffee cup. "I don't think I've ever heard anything so moving." "Keep going," another man added. "You've got something special, don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Lena thanked them with quiet humility, her heart swelling with gratitude. These weren't just compliments. They were validations of everything she'd worked for, everything she'd dreamed of becoming. Finch, however, was not so gracious. As Lena approached his table to deliver the check, he looked up at her with an expression that teetered between annoyance and reluctant admiration. "You've made your point," he said, his tone clipped. "No need to rub it in." Lena paused, meeting his gaze directly. "It was never about proving anything to you," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "I just wanted to play." Finch had no response. He fidgeted with his drink, his once commanding presence reduced to an awkward shuffle. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and everyone at the table knew it. As Finch scribbled his signature on the check, one of his companions, a younger man with a softer demeanor, looked at Lena and said, "You were amazing, truly." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, and for a moment she saw a flicker of humanity in a group she had written off as shallow. "Thank you," she replied, offering a small smile before walking away. The night ended with Finch and his group leaving quietly, their usual grand exit replaced by a hasty retreat. Lena watched them go, feeling neither triumph nor bitterness. She wasn't thinking about Finch anymore. Her mind was already on the next step. The tips from that night were unusually generous, enough to cover her rent and leave a little extra for piano lessons she'd been postponing. As she locked up and walked home, the crisp air filling her lungs, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in years: certainty. She wasn't just a waitress, and she wasn't just a dreamer. She was an artist, and nothing, not mocking words, not financial struggles, not fear, could take that away from her. Days later, the story of the waitress and the piano went viral. News channels picked it up, social media buzzed with her performance, a beacon of unexpected brilliance. Then the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. On the other end was a voice calm yet authoritative, belonging to a renowned music executive from Nashville, a figure known for discovering raw, authentic talent and championing artists from underrepresented backgrounds. He'd seen the video. He spoke not of fame or fortune, but of artistry of soul, of a talent that needed to be heard. He offered Lena a fully funded scholarship to one of the most prestigious music conservatories in the country, an opportunity to finally pursue the formal training she had always yearned for. It wasn't a record deal, not yet. It was something far more profound, a chance to finally truly play her own symphony. Lena agreed, not because she believed it would change her life overnight, but because it felt like a door opening, one she wasn't afraid to walk through. This wasn't luck. This was the universe responding to years of relentless effort and a single courageous act of defiance. Serendipity, after all, favors the prepared heart. Lena's journey was far from over, but for the first time, it felt like it had truly begun. She embraced the scholarship trading, the clinking of silverware for the harmonious resonance of grand pianos in hallowed halls. Her talent, once a quiet private solace, now blossomed under expert guidance. She still faced challenges: the demanding curriculum, the lingering self-doubt, the echoes of past struggles. But now, she had the resources, the support, and most importantly, the unwavering confidence forged in that moment of public defiance. She was no longer just a dreamer. She was an active participant in her own destiny. Lena's story, amplified by the viral video, became more than just a local anecdote. It transformed into a powerful narrative of resilience and authenticity. She began to use her platform not just for her own success, but to inspire others. Perhaps once established, she initiated a scholarship fund for aspiring young musicians from disadvantaged backgrounds, mirroring the unexpected hand-up she had received. Or perhaps she became an outspoken advocate for equitable access to arts education, understanding firsthand how a single opportunity could change the entire trajectory of a life. Her music, now richer and more profound, became a voice for the voiceless, a melody of hope for those who felt unheard. The incident with Sterling Finch wasn't just a humiliating spectacle turned victory. It was a stark reminder of the power of integrity. Finch, for all his wealth and bravado, had nothing that could diminish her. He represented every voice of doubt she had ever faced, every societal expectation that tried to keep her in her place. And she silenced him with nothing but the purity of her craft. His arrogance dissolved in the face of her undeniable talent, leaving only the uncomfortable truth of his own smallness. To anyone watching Lena's story, her message was clear. Never let someone else define your worth. The world is full of sterling finches. People who project their insecurities onto others to feel powerful. They try to box you in to dictate your potential, to dismiss your dreams. But true power comes from staying rooted in who you are, from understanding your own inherent value, and from letting your passions speak louder than their ridicule. What about you? What dream have you been holding back on because of fear or doubt? What inner melody have you silenced because someone else tried to tell you it wasn't good enough or that your stage was too small? Lena didn't wait for someone like Finch to test her. She was already preparing, already nurturing her gift. When the moment came, she took her step forward. Don't wait for a public challenge to reveal your strength. Take your step forward now. Unmute your symphony. Let your authentic self be the loudest, most beautiful note in the grand orchestra of your life. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think, made you feel, then please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message and subscribe to our channel for more tales that challenge, inspire, and remind us of the incredible human spirit. Your support helps us amplify these crucial stories. Thank you for listening.